So this is education for life, and I underline life because it's for all life long. And we think of education as something we just do in the first, 21, 22 years, or if you go ahead and become a doctor, maybe it's going to be 26, 7 years. But can education also include qualities, concepts, ideas, experiences that help us in all of life, just in everyday life challenges? And of course we say yes, the answer is yes. I saw today, just this is so timely, it's getting so that you see more and more societies coming to an understanding that this is what's needed. And just today I saw in the New York Times, I have so many things I want to share that I have to pour through here. This was quoted. It was Walter Kern who said this, and he went to Princeton. And he said, to young people born under the weird planet of the SAT, Scholastic Aptitude Test, and raised on the pseudo-scientific notion that mental worth can be ranked in percentiles, intelligence was an empty vessel void of content and void of passion. It represented the ability to shine at whatever task was put before one, but not the urge to master any task, let alone because one loved that task. As such, it produced a sort of person who was a mental contortionist, able to rise to almost every challenge placed before him at school or work, except to the challenge of self-knowledge. And what could be more important than that? Self-knowledge. Who am I? Why am I here? What do I want to do? What's my gift? What can I offer? What makes me happy? And all of those concepts. Our children are precious, precious gifts. Why do we have children? I bet if I asked each of you why you had children, there'd be quite a few different answers. But once they're here, we find out that we had them to teach us unconditional love, and that there's nothing they won't do to teach it to us. Well, is there? And once you have a child and you experience that love, I think it is life-changing, isn't it? I'm going to take off from what Paul said about being conscious parents, because I think that's what we all want, is to be conscious parents, or in the case of we who are teaching, conscious of us who are teaching, of us, whatever. Conscious, we want to be conscious teachers. And I will say that nothing helps you become more conscious than working with children, because of course they reflect back everything that we give out, don't they? And you know this from your own experience. And when we're in a mood, pretty soon things take a turn for the worse with the kids. And so we want to become more conscious. And what does conscious mean? I'm sure that each of us would have some slightly different definition, but I think we might all agree that one thing it means is just being in the present moment, not thinking ahead to the future. What's going to happen tomorrow, or what's going to happen when my child's grown up, whoa, or what am I making for dinner, and not being in the past, like yesterday he did this, why can't he do it right today, or not being in the past, like why was my husband irritated with me this morning, but being present in this moment with whatever is happening. And that's a great spiritual practice for all of us, but it's something that children really demand for us to be really excellent teachers and parents. Now, you cannot give it, and then you've seen the children who never get it. They're the ones whining all the time because they're just wanting somebody to actually look at them and see them without being preoccupied. And how can we help but be preoccupied? I mean, those of you who are parents have so much on your plates to balance, and relationships, and home responsibilities, and taking physical care of your children in the home, and some of us going out to earn money as well. And there's so much to think about. And how can we not be preoccupied some of the time? And we don't have to give our kids that undivided attention 100% of the time, but we do need to be present, to be conscious. And that means being right there with what's happening and accepting it and not wishing it's different than it is. Now, it may need to change, You know, if your child is hitting another child, of course that needs to change, but it just doesn't help at all when we get upset with ourselves or angry or frustrated, does it? If we can just stay in our center, stay calm, then we might be able to help the situation. But that's a big challenge. And you know, I'll come back to this many times, I'm sure, during the weekend, but it's the challenge that brings us so much grace, doesn't it? Because when we can do it, we see the results, and we see those moments that all of you described were moments that you were completely present, weren't you, with what was going on, and not thinking about what was, what will be. You were just right there enjoying that moment. And how can we learn to enjoy the moments that aren't as pleasant? Well, maybe that's a big stretch to enjoy them, but can we at least accept them and say, all right, this is what's happening now. How can I help my child make their next step? If it's something that needs to change, how can I motivate them? We'll talk a lot about that tomorrow, about motivating and looking for the best that's in each child at the same time. And even when they're being so unlovable, of course that's when they need our love the most, is when they're completely unlovable. But being able to see that spark in them of the soul, crying out to learn, crying out to develop, crying out for maturity, but not knowing how to do that, but to keep that in mind, and to always attribute to them the highest motives, that if they're being unruly or whatever, there's something needed. And it might be something like being strict and being demanding, but something's missing, rather than that they are arbitrarily trying to test your limits. Although sometimes they will test your limits just to be sure they're loved, just to be sure that you're willing to provide that container for them to bump up against, right? And when we look for the strengths in each child and we reflect those back in our eyes, it's like you know, we all love to be around saintly people, because not only do they love us, but they love us the way we are. They're not wishing that we put the toothpaste cap on this morning, or wishing that we had kissed them goodbye when they left. They're just loving us and accepting the way we are and seeing the highest that we can be. And that's what we can offer our children, and what we, all living wisdom teachers, are attempting, are succeeding at this school most of the time, is offering that, pulling out the highest and looking for the highest and the best, rather than trying to fix anything that's wrong. Because when you pull out the highest and when you affirm the strengths in a child, then they're more willing to go there and try to and experiment with things that are difficult for them. But when they don't have that confidence and that belief in us, then there's such insecurity and resistance, isn't there? So I think a big difference, I know one time when I was teaching in our school in California before I even moved to Portland, we had a family who was adopting a child from India. And they came, the social worker came as part of the case study for the final thing, whatever they call it when it's final, and this governmental agency or whatever it was, the social work agency, withdraws from it, that's their child. And part of what they have to do is go to the school and interview people at the school and observe the child at the school. And so the social worker was talking to me as, I wasn't the child's teacher, but I was in an administrative role partly at the time. And they were saying, well, what is she like? And I described them a little bit. And they'd been to the classroom and seen, and they said, well, what about all her physical energy? I said, yes, she's exuberant, and we have to look for ways to channel that energy and give her this and give her that. And the social worker just put down her pencil and leaned across the desk, and she said, do you know that this child, if she were in public school, would be put in a special classroom for ADD or ADHD or something? And I said, well, I hadn't thought about it, but yes, you're probably right. And she said, I can't get over this place. And instead of that, you look at their energy as an asset, and how can we channel it? And I said, it was great to see it through her eyes, because that is how we all saw that child's energy. And I saw her recently at her sister's wedding. And there she was, home from college. She was living in San Diego, this accomplished horsewoman, that's what she did with that physical energy. She became an accomplished horsewoman. I remember a child that came to our school in the early years whose parent brought her here because she had, I don't know why the parent brought her here, but she did have some academic challenges, not attention challenge, not being unable to sit still or anything like that, but just wasn't learning to read as quickly as she should, and the parent probably thought, well, this small setting she'll get more individual attention. And in some schools, this child, because she was reading and doing math behind grade level, that would have been the main thing, is what are we going to do? You do a IEP or some sort of plan, and how are we going to remediate this? How are we going to fix her reading? How are we going to, how many drills are we going to give her the math? But what we saw in this child was a sensitive person who noticed everything. She'd come up to you in the morning, "Oh, I love that pink and silver scarf." And gradually, as we got to know her better, we noticed that she knew everyone in the school and all their business. So after school, if I saw some parent that I wanted to say something to, but I'm talking to someone else, and in a few moments I looked for that parent and I didn't see them, I could go to this child who was 7 years old and say, "Where's Sally's mother?" And she'd say, "Oh, she just went into the Angel House door." She always had track of I just thought she'd make a great event planner. She could do all this stuff in her mind. And she was just cared. She felt connections and knew everybody was noticing everything. Another time at Christmas time, this happened to be, we were doing a little program and I was making a little altar with stars and Y's and N and, just making it really ornate and beautiful. And she came in and she just stood in front of it. And it was like she was drinking in the beauty. And then she just turned to me and she said, "My grandmother loves Jesus," and she skipped out. And I just thought, she got this whole entire thing, this event that I'm trying to create a certain feeling without talking about it, without hearing anything about it. She just felt it, processed it. And, her gift was feeling. She was so in touch with feeling and beauty and connecting with people. And later on, she finished our school. She went to a different school, and she's just very happy, healthy, well-adjusted, socially successful person, because of course she did learn to read and write and do math. And maybe that won't ever be her, I don't know how she developed, but I kind of suspect she won't probably go to college and be an engineer. But do we need a world full of only engineers? We do need engineers, but we also need those people who know whose mother just went in over there and who's got on the beautiful scarf and is in touch with those realities. As this quote said that I read earlier, we're coming to an age and a time where there's more realization that intellectual accomplishment doesn't in itself make us happy. It doesn't mean that we're anti-intellectual at all. It just means that I think of another child who came here who was brilliant, very, very verbal, you could call him a brain. And but his parents had the wisdom to bring him here not because we had a program for the talented and gifted. Mm-hmm. We didn't have SUMA or TAG or blah, 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 blah. But they wanted to have him to have a balanced education. And so here he got more self-confidence, more encouragement, encouragement, support in developing his physical skills, his body skills. And now he is quite an accomplished student, graduating from high school this year, but not just a brain that doesn't have the feeling side developed, the body side developed.